Hello, darlings. Hello, this is Micah Riot. Today, I have a guest on my podcast that I've been wanting to have for probably as long as the podcast has existed. It is Skeeter Barker. And if you don't know who she is, I'm sorry. But if you don't know who she is a community leader, a yoga teacher, a dyke, a butch dyke, very hot butch dyke, daddy style, a leather dyke, a leather woman, a leather maker. Skeeter Barker works for Mistress Leather, world-known leather outfitter for gay men. They make toys, they make clothing, fetish gear, and she designs and used to do a lot of the sewing, but I believe now is managing the sewing at Mistress Leather. She travels for the company, and she's one of the main people there at the company. She's really built the company up to be what it is today. And this is not a flex for all, but she is friends with people like Dan Savage and his husband Terry. It's a flex for me. I love Dan Savage. And I've known her for almost as long as I've been in SF, living in the Bay Area. And for a lot of that time, in the early years, I had a giant crush on her, and we have now become friends. She's been getting tattooed by me for a bunch of years. And the very first introduction to her I had was as a 24-year-old. I think I was 24 at the time, maybe 23. And I started coming to her yoga classes with my then lover, who broke my heart into a million little pieces. It was really probably the hardest time of my life, as far as heartbreak goes, as far as relationships coming apart go. And I started going to Skeeter's yoga class every week and sometimes twice a week, and just healed myself through it. Like, really, I mean, I did a lot of things that first year after that relationship, but that was one of the main things. And I kind of imprinted on Skeeter as a mentor and a kind of a lovely parental energy. And by parental, I mean daddy energy. I think of Skeeter as kind of energetically community daddy. I don't know anybody that I spent time with back then in those days in SF when I was in my 20s who was not affected by Skeeter, by her kindness, her presence, her wisdom, her adjusting us on the yoga floor. We all wanted to be adjusted by her. Anyway, why don't we listen to her? Here she is, Skeeter Barker. Skeeter.
Micah.
How long have we known each other?
You know, you might be better able to answer that than me. I have no memory, but
I was like 24 and I'm 40 now.
Oh, there you go. What's
Yeah.
the maths on that?
It's like about 16
Yeah.
years or so.
Seems longer, but yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's most of my adult life.
Yeah. I mean, you were definitely a baby when I met you, like a young, queer.
I mean, I had just had my heart broken
Yeah.
and just was like coming to your classes like crying in Shavasana.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a very common, I think, thing in those queer classes, or heavily queer, where people, and I hope I gave permission to just be like, you know what, lie down and cry, and a lot of people did.
So, before you, like I wasn't seeking out yoga ever, right? Like yoga wasn't something that I was like, I want to go do that, because it was so skinny white lady like thing. Mm-hmm. And then I came to your classes and I was like, here's like a butch, like a very different type of person, covered in tattoos,
Yeah.
older. It just felt so good to be in that space. Like I felt so held by you, and like so did everybody else. That's why we kept coming, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny.
How did you come to that?
Yeah, it was I call myself the accidental yoga teacher because I had done yoga for years, but I was that, like, especially back in the day, I was the hairy leg tattooed butch in the back with weird cargo shorts on while everybody else were these skinny white ladies in Lululemon. I mean, it really was uncomfortable. but there was something about the practice of yoga and this particular style of yoga that really spoke to me in my body in a way that, because I wasn't a gym bunny, I was never a jock, but it spoke to me and I felt like empowered in it. So I kept going. And then I found a teacher who I really loved. And I did a 3-month in-depth training with her in San Francisco. And then I was like, oh, I want to know more. And then she was doing a teacher training. And so I signed up for the teacher training, which was a year long, to get deeper into it myself. And at the end, before the end of it, and she taught at that studio in San Francisco, she looked me up, she literally looked me up and down and she said, you need to teach. And I'm like, no, I'm not trying to teach. She said, you need to teach. She said, I have a community class at this studio. There's the slots opening up for a teacher. Maybe 5 people come donation on a Wednesday night. You should take it. And
maybe 5, huh?
Yeah, right? It was like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? Okay, let me give it a go. And I think exactly that. I think because of the way I looked and the way that I teach, which is, I'm not in your body. I don't have the experience of your body. So I'm going to throw some things out. You can modify, you can expand. I think the class became permission for however you were walking in. Plus, I think, the way I looked and who I was in community, other people could come and access it. And so it very quickly, like within a month, it swelled to like 25, 30, 40.
And this was the Yoga Coolest space that we were in.
Yeah, in San Francisco. Beautiful studio, right?
Yeah.
And then I went to a Friday night as well, Wednesday, Friday.
And Monday?
Monday started over in Oakland. It started in the, I was doing 3 days a week when I went to Namaste. And, I've always done, even in the park, wherever I've done it, and taught with Rochelle as well, always been donation-based. At the studios it's harder because there was like, I'm like, I will only teach anywhere, and you see a lot of people come if there's got to be a sliding scale. So it just grew, and I think people who'd never been into yoga or thought yoga was for them found access and community. Like, so many things happened. People found partners, they found a wardrobe because somebody was getting rid of it, they found a roommate. There was so many connections. People would talk because it was always the last class. And I love that. Like, I love seeing the connections. And I've had people many years later say, me and my partner, we were married with a kid. We met in your class. We met at your retreat. I'm like, that's beautiful.
The retreat.
The retreat.
The retreat happened, like, I think I got to start going at, like, the second retreat. Like, I was super early on that train.
Yeah, you were.
And it was so great. And for a decade, I looked forward to that. That would come every fall. We would do it in September, right? And I mean,
then we started doing a spring one closer.
We did, and I didn't go to that except one time, but it was a different space. Like, I really loved that land.
Different space, different vibe. Completely different vibe too. Yeah.
But being on that land, up there in, what was that town called?
I always want to say Ukiah, but that's where Ore Hot Springs is.
Higher up. It was higher than Ukiah. It was higher,
yeah. And it's Chrissy Kifa's land.
Yeah, Chrissy Kifa's land, women's land. It was so beautiful there, and it was so restoring. I felt like that was my sort of my turnover of a leaf of the year. Like, going there, like leaving some things, taking some things.
Yeah, and I think we set intentional space to have circles of like, what are you working with? What are you bringing in a closing circle? It was very woo-woo. Yeah. But people did. They released things. They let things go. A dear friend of mine who, like you, came on the early train and was coming. And, she, a few years ago, died of cancer in her 40s. And one of the things that was really meaningful was to see her blossom over the years, because she came very, very shy. And she was a writer, an amazing writer. And she was very nervous, but we had the talent show, right? It's like, do whatever. Just get up there and, everybody will clap for you. And I saw her sort of really blossom, and she started reading her work, and she became a writer. So things like that, where it was, yes, it's about yoga, but it's not just about move your body in these particular positions, but like become empowered, in yourself enough to live a powerful life.
So, I mean, that's how I know you, from yoga. Mm-hmm. But there's so many other sort of crossovers or pieces, like...
Yeah, there are.
So let's talk about your tattoos. So you started coming to me to get tattooed at some point.
Yeah.
Periodically for different pieces, like through the years.
Yeah.
And you have a lot of tattoo work. You probably were the most tattooed person for much of your life, right? And you were out and about.
Yeah.
In
Yeah,
the community.
I do think that's true. I mean, I think there were people more heavily tattooed than me in the sort of San Francisco body mod world of the 90s, but, within... Yeah, but I definitely was heavily
How did you start that journey?
The tattoo journey for me?
Yeah. So, okay, how old are you?
I'm 60.
And you are from?
England. Great Britain.
Yes.
There are many ways to say that. That's going to, one way or another, going to sort of be the right or the wrong way to say it. But I was born in Scotland, grew up in Devon in England, and then...
And when did you come over here to the new world?
Yeah, I moved to London and was a young dyke in London, a young leather dyke, had a really good time in my sort of early 20s, very early 20s. And then I didn't move to San Francisco. I came on a visit because I'd just broken up with somebody and was like, I just need different change of scenery. Came to San Francisco, late 80s, heyday. I mean, heyday and hard because the AIDS epidemic was just a whole generation of gay, and the leather community at that point was very integrated between, the dykes and the gay guys. There was like the leather, it was beautiful. So came to San Francisco, had the big earthquake in 89. I'm like, what the fuck is that?
You were here for that and you visit?
Yeah. And I was
That's
like,
wild.
And people are like, no. We have earthquakes, but that is an earthquake.
Yeah, that was like a special one.
That was a very...
What were you doing when that was happening?
I was actually buzzing Jamie's hair.
Okay.
We were watching the World Series at a friend's house, and suddenly the game cut out. The clippers that had done half her hair stopped, and the whole place started shaking. These old San Francisco, flats. Terrifying. Like for me, if like the ground beneath you completely is shaking everything, there's nothing to hold on to. So the funny part was that we had no power for, whatever, a week after. And so Jamie had half a shaved head for a while.
No one took like a little hand
shaver. We were just all freaked out. We were all sitting in coffee shops like, where were you? Is everything, it really was a thing. It was anyway, and there were many aftershocks. So but I love San Francisco. I was having great fun playing, falling in and out of love. Just the heyday of there were bars, and it was just fun clubs.
How long of a visit was it?
Well, the first time I came for 3 weeks.
Okay.
And I went back to my life in London, and I was like, I got to go for longer. So I think after about another 6 months, I got a year visa, and I came here for a year. And during that time, it really was like, I met Jamie, she became my boy, we really, I just really started to make some, how you do when you're in your early 20s, like roots, like this is,
Chosen family.
Chosen family. And so I went back to London after 6 months, moved for a year, back and forth for a couple of years. And then Jamie's roommate, Scott, who is just a great guy, and we were really good friends. And one night at New Year's, I think, we were all drunk on Jägermeister at a club, and he got down on his knees and said, will you marry me? So I did. And if immigration's listening, we were very in love, and...
I know the story. I heard that you were very in love.
We were very in love, and we got married, and I got, my permanent green card.
Yeah.
So I never really planned on it. I didn't emigrate. I didn't... for years after, my mum was like, are you coming home? You got stuff in... So I just kind of left and stayed. Again, kind of accidentally, but created a life, and now I bridge two worlds because I go back to England and they're like, you sound so American. And I'm here and people are like, are you Australian, New Zealand, South African? I was like, oh. So yeah, I've been here 35 plus years. Thinking about it the other day, people ask me how long I've been at Mr. S, Mr. S Leathers, and that's 35 years too. I mean, Jamie worked there first and I got a job there, but so I've been there a long, long time, kind of run the company with two guys. Mm-hmm. So longevity at this point of being 60, and, I moved around a lot in my youth. I traveled through Europe, I hitchhiked, I moved a lot. We moved a lot when I was a kid. So the fact that I have been in a job as long as I've been in, and have a 15-year-old son and have solid family, chosen family here, I feel, you sort of look back sometimes. I mean, when you get, older, you look back and you're like, wow, when and how did all that happen? Mm-hmm. Like, you know, that thing, my memory is so always been weird. And sometimes I look back and I'm like, it just was yesterday. Like, I remember the earthquake. I remember moving to San Francisco. I remember the, you know, Summer of Love, and it was amazing. And then sometimes it's like, that is a long time ago. And so what I love is like yourself. Like, I've known you 16 years. You know, I've got friends, Jamie and I have known each other most of that 35 years. Mm-hmm. Rochelle and I, you know, 20 plus. So it's a good thing. And sometimes it's really, I think as you get older, to look back and be like, wow, a lot has happened. You know, and I look forward to a lot more happening, but it changes. It's different.
I started doing this thing on New Year's, around New Year's, that I look at the year and I just note the things that happened.
Through the year.
It's so easy to forget. Yeah, like literally what happened. I took this trip. I had this amazing conversation. So I remember I made stickers. I made a podcast. I made this many episodes of the podcast. Wow. I worked on like this thing in my life. I got dental work, like what, you know, just noting things that happened, because it is so easy to lose track of like things that happen, right? And then 20 years later, you're like, all this shit happened.
Somehow, somewhere. Do you also then do a sort of visioning for the next year, that were things you want, or is it just that retrospective of this has been my year and I'm just going to mark these achievements so that...
Yeah, more that, less of the like, what's going to happen next year. We'll see what happens next year. I mean, if I have some goals, it might be like, oh, I'm going to try to, you know, tighten up my finances. I'm going to try to, you know, I have an apprentice to teach. Like, I know that's going to happen next year, right? But just to like really look at each year and just be like, all this stuff happened and I remember it now that I've said it.
Yeah.
I usually tell it to Liz, you know?
Yeah.
We have a conversation about things that happen.
Yeah. I mean, I think that thing of the tradition in many parts of the world and cultures is that oral history where you tell the stories. And you know, in cultures where the elders are more respected and people will sit and listen, that oral history is passed on. And, you know, I do think that it is good to recount things and remember things and have people witness it. You know, I think that there are people who... You know, I'm just going to keep using the earthquake as an example, but there are people like, I was with Jamie when that happened. So when we talk about it or remind each other, it's very visceral. It's very like, yes, we remember that.
A trauma bond.
The trauma bond, as you will. But, you know...
For sure. Yeah, I mean, we all remember where we were at 9/11, you know? Like
exactly.
I was sitting in a classroom.
Exactly, yeah. And I think that one of the things for me, because my memory has, maybe because I moved and had, you know, whatever childhood I had, but I think that I once described myself as a loaf of sliced bread, you know, and it's like the whole loaf is me. The whole loaf is my life, you know, from one end to the other is going to be my life. But each piece of it can feel like a separate slice, you know. I can talk about my yoga and I can talk about queer yoga and the retreats, and that's like a full, beautiful slice. I can talk about kink or, you know, sort of being in the leather scene, and that is something else. And sometimes I have a hard time weaving the thread through the whole loaf. You know, like these pieces belong together.
I don't think you're a bread loaf.
I'm not a bread loaf.
I think you're like a cake.
Ooh, yum.
Like many layered, like, do you like chocolate?
I love chocolate.
Is it chocolate cake? I don't know. But you're like a bread loaf.
I mean, you know, I'm just thinking about sliced bread, you know, not necessarily.
But like slices of a cake.
Sure.
Your cake with like some chili on it and some chocolate.
No chili.
No chili.
Not with chocolate. I don't do sweet.
You're not spicy.
Oh, I am spicy, which is why I don't
spicy.
need spice. I just, yeah.
Well, it's not a cake you want to eat. It's you are the cake.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'll take it.
I mean, you can pick whatever flavors are in the cake, but I'm like a bread loaf.
That's funny. I never really thought about the whole, you know, sort of deliciousness of it. It's just a way I sort of visualize my life.
I do love bread, though, so I'm nothing against bread.
Nothing wrong with bread.
But, you know, it's like we'll say white bread or whatever, like,
yeah,
it's like boring.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing boring about the different, like, chapters of your life.
No, not at all. They're very full, and I feel very, you know. Yeah, there's been some tricky parts, some difficult parts, and there's been some amazing parts. And, you know, I feel grateful because I've known a lot of people who did not make it past 40, past 30, past 50, like a lot of people. A lot of 20-year-olds, you know, gay guys died in that. You know, we constantly, at that time in the leather community, we were often sitting at the bedside of because it went really fast from somebody getting full-blown AIDS and without having any medicines.
Totally.
And they
just
went
died
very fast. And so
Yeah.
we were often sitting at bedsides and going to memorials, most weekends. And so to get to 60, to be healthy, I still think of myself as vibrant, to be sort of out in the world doing things, it doesn't go unnoticed that it's really a privilege. Aging is a bitch, and it's a privilege to be able to do it.
I mean, what other choice, right? Otherwise you
Right.
die.
Otherwise you go on to whatever's next. Yeah. So obviously I'm not done, and I've got a long life ahead of me.
When did you get your first tattoo?
I think it was around the age of 15. I remember the place. It was in Plymouth where I was growing up, and I had slept with my first girlfriend when I was 14. She was kind of a little bit older than me, started coming to my school and sort of seduced me. And
Say more
about that.
Like at that time, you had no books, no other people probably that were really visible.
Nope.
Like, how did it
happen?
How did you just sort of know like what you want and
I didn't.
you wanted it? And
I had no idea. I was a tomboy all my life, and I went to an all-girls school, and I was never, the girls were like, ooh, because the boys' school was next door, and I never have had a sexual attraction. Men are great. I love men, work with them all day, have a son, love men. Just have never had a sexual attraction to a guy. I'm a, what do you call it?
a gold star.
Gold star. I'll take it. And so but I wasn't also necessarily that I could remember attracted to girls. I loved my friends. I was funny. I was popular. But and then this tough girl called Debbie came to my school, and she was a character, butch, beyond tomboy, just like, and she was very, I think she had a tough time. I know she had a tough time. So she was very sort of like, she was not trying to make friends with anybody. And for some reason, she liked me, and we started hanging out. And then I remember one night she stayed over at my house. She was sleeping on, on the floor, and I was in my little single bed there. And I remember she got into bed with me, and she just started kissing me. And I think I cried. I mean, I had no concept. She knew what she wanted. I had no concept of what was going on. But, later learned that, she was 15, maybe going on 16. And she had already explored, because back in the day, this is Plymouth, it's a naval working class town. There was a red light area, and where all the sex workers worked. There was a back street. That's where I got my first tattoo. It was like a sailor shop, literally like, the stereotypical. Mm-hmm. And then there was a gay bar way down this old cobbled lane, and she'd already been there. And I remember after we started doing our thing, she completely underage, but nobody caught it in those days. She took me into that bar, and I remember so clearly. I walked in, and there were all these bulldaggers at the bar, sitting there like full on older bulldaggers, and the ladies, the femmes, were all kind of sitting around the tables. And I feel like, and I'm sure it wasn't this clear, but to my mind, I feel like I got looked up and down, like it was almost like, where are you going to sit? Like it felt like I had to choose, right?
Like a gender, like you had to choose a gender.
You just had to choose, like you.
And you had long hair at the time?
No, I always had short hair.
Okay.
I was always a tomboy.
Okay.
So, and Debbie had been there before, and she walked straight up to the bar. I walked up to the bar, sat down, and I remember this old butch. I mean, again, my memory is, how you piece memory together. But in my mind and in my memory, this old butch slapped me on the shoulder, and she's like, hey. And, I just started going down that pub. And Debbie and I think lasted for just under a year, I broke her heart sleeping with an older woman who was a DJ at a club, and she joined the army, which was one of the choices, and she went away.
So she was a butch on butch kind of.
She was a butch on butch, yeah.
And you were not.
Well, I
like all. You like it all?
I didn't know at that point.
Yeah.
I didn't know, but I had a very much that sort of awe about the mystery of femmes. Like it was so opposite to me. And butches were familiar to me, or at least, I can model myself in that way with them. So I have certainly dated and had good relationships with, 2 or 3 butches in my life. But really, I am, mostly my attraction is for feminine women, or not high femme, like just a powerful femme woman. But I have such a deep appreciation for mask, like a pride, and I like that attraction. Like I see someone mask in the street and I'm just like that head nod and that way that they show up, or watching young, butches or masked people just finding themselves. And I'm like, it just makes my heart full. And, like in the kink world, I've certainly I love to beat a boy, I love to I had a boy for quite a while. So yeah, different scenarios, different things, but
And so what was your first tattoo that you got there in the back streets of the red light district?
Yeah, I know, right? It was
in the first gay bar ever.
On the back of my shoulder, and you may have seen it, may not, is a very old spider.
Okay, I see the spider.
Yeah, it was. I think it must have been on his wall or something. And
nice.
And I never have had, like how things get incorporated later. People tattoo around it, and sometimes people do cover-ups. I've only got one cover-up, because to me it really is. It's a map of my life. I can show you that spider, and I can tell you that story. Mm-hmm. So I've never wanted to really do, and I don't love all my tattoos. I'm not like, wow, this is great. They're faded. I had friends practice on me.
It's a very different way of getting a body of work where you came from versus what's happening now.
Yeah.
People used to do that. Yeah. You were kind of a quilt of things.
Exactly.
Different pieces from different times.
Yeah.
Now people want, a comprehensive body of work. They want a full thought through kind of a bodysuit, the same styles repeating, and it's just, it's a very different trend. It
is a different trend, and I also see a lot of the young folks, doing this sort of stamp tattoos where they've got, and it's, I love tattoos. It's a turn on for me. I love it. I love all the different styles, when it fits a body, when you look at somebody and they're embodied in a way that they're decorating and living in their body, it's fucking beautiful, and sometimes that's a full color arm sleeve. Sometimes it's a bunch of stamp tattoos. Sometimes it's an old, my current girl lover, she's like, she's younger than me and tattoo artist. And when she saw my tattoo, she's like, oh yeah, real, I think she said 90s. And I'm like, yeah, this was my era of when I got a lot of my work done. But I've had a lot more done, even very recently with you. Mm-hmm. Love your work that you've done, the tattoos on my neck, on my chest, working on my thigh. So, I love, I think it's a beautiful form of expression. It's not everybody's.
So what was it like to be heavily tattooed in the world as a butch and a heavily tattooed person when not a lot of people had them? I mean, I guess your world has always been like what you wanted it to be, more or less.
Yeah, I mean, my early life, I had enough of, feeling on the outside, being gay bashed, being, sort of feeling endangered, in most spaces. And I very quickly found communities, bubbles of people. It's one of the reasons I moved to London. It's one of the reasons I moved to San Francisco. So again, the privilege of being able to find community. And, back in the 80s and 90s, it was definitely there. It wasn't like, I'm not talking, I came out in the 60s and 70s. I mean, I definitely, came out at a time and could find kink, could find leather parties, could find leather people, queer people, other butchers, and I don't know that I felt different particularly. I just felt like, I just feel like that's just me, that's who I am and how I show up. And I don't think I've ever really in queer community have experienced any. I remember once going to LA and with a girlfriend of mine, very femme, very beautiful. And we went to an LA club back in the day when it was a lot of lipstick lesbians. And we walked up to the door of this woman's club, like a Dyke bar. And my friend, of course, the door person's like, who was a lipstick lesbian, big hair. She's like, oh, because, Stephanie's gorgeous, and she just rolls through. And then she looked me up and down. She goes, you can't come in. I said, I'm sorry, what? She's like, you can't come in. And Stephanie came back and she said, what's up? I said, they won't let me in. And I'm like, it's a woman Dyke bar, right? And she's like, yeah, but we don't, And I was, what the fuck? So I went.
So you didn't go in?
No, we all left. The whole group. There was a few of us. We just like, fuck you,
Wow.
So
you there was no you just had to leave. There was no. talk to the manager.
No, because I didn't want to walk into a place where Stephanie did not want to walk into a place where I don't know what it was like inside. I didn't get inside, but maybe if it was a bunch of people like the woman on the door. I remember going to a Dinah Shore weekend because I was doing some kind of work thing there, and it was like, just like, wow, like a very different type of lesbian scene. And in those environments over the years, I felt like, wow, I'm sort of an outlier, which didn't make me feel bad about myself. I was just like, wow, this is not my people. Mm-hmm. And I think being queer, being however you describe yourself, it doesn't mean that everywhere you go in queer community or gay community or whatever, it's like, you don't always feel like, oh, these are my people. So
when did you feel that shift happen? Because I feel like that was a thing and LA was like that. And then, I feel like our queer culture shifted to there being like a worship of the mask, like the masculine person, the butch, the trans mask person. Like, when do you think that shift occurred?
Well, when I really feel like I remember things happening, because the same incident I'm talking about in LA, what was happening in San Francisco was, we had the Bearded Lady, we had, some clubs, and then the Lexington opened. And very clearly, in fact, at first, the Lexington and, Layla who opened it, and a lot of us started going early on, it was very much, I wouldn't say predominantly, but heavily laden with butch femme. Mm-hmm. That was the vibe. Mm-hmm. It was incredible. It was lovely. I've since talked to people who said, I walked in and didn't feel I fit. So, we all, if we fit in the bubble, we feel great. If we don't, we don't. Right. But then this interesting thing happened. So there was this celebration of butches and masks, but then several of my solid butch friends started transitioning. And so early on, and I think that there was this sort of time where people who really had felt like, I'm not in the body that I need to be in. I'm not, and there was access in San Francisco to tea and to surgery and to other communities and to professionals here who people could transition. But then there was this weird stage, I feel like, and I noticed it, and I can only sort of pinpoint it really to this micro world in the Lexington, where so many young butches started just taking tea, having the tits cut off, but it became almost like, it became a little bit the thing to do. And
Bear agrees with you.
Bear, my dog, agrees with me. And then, for example, Boy Sue, who was my boy for quite a while, beautiful, amazing, intelligent person, was like, we started to get to know each other, and they were in the world of that as a young, butch. And one of the conversations I remember having with two people in the Lexington was like, I feel like I have to. Like, I don't feel like there's an alternative. Like, it's almost like this is what we do now. Mm-hmm. As a young butch, I have to then start taking tea. And I was like, wow, is that true? Is that like... And one of the things I started to notice was less and less were there slightly older, and at that point I'm talking, 40s, butches visible, and certainly not older than me, in these public spaces. And so I think there was a little bit of the mix of celebrating people finding themselves in their bodies and really just that pride in that, and like the trans march and it really growing into this beautiful celebration, and a little level of, maybe a lot of level of grieving that happened. I've femme women who are like, my partner's transitioning, and they felt even more invisible, but also really wanting to celebrate their partner. And I think that I feel like there was a bit of grieving for me that I lost quite a lot of butch friends in that way, and gained trans, friends, trans men friends. But it was and both. I have to be really honest about it. And there was a moment in that time where there almost felt a little bit of competition and friction between trans men and butches. I had conversations with butches who were like, I don't feel butch enough now. I feel like I have to, I'm not enough or something. And trans men who were struggling with being accepted into queer spaces, like Dyke spaces, because they were starting to feel like they were not included. So it was a moment in time, I think. I think if you could sort of put it under a microscope and go this moment in time in San Francisco where something started really shifting. And I think we've come a long way of like community and celebration, and there's space for everybody, and we all get to, explore what we want. But I think that's whenever I see, especially older butch women, I'm like, hey, and just always want to be sort of role model in some ways for younger butch women who are like, that trans is not my journey. And I see you living a life and having the things you want and representing yourself in the world. So to me, the pronouns of she, her are really important. So I just think it's a changed world. And I think that, it's really about just, we're not in competition and, we're in celebration of each other because like you said, there's fewer of us and we cannot have that kind of diversity, that tearing apart. But it was a moment in time where it was very, it felt that way. My experience.
Yeah.
So
I wanted to offer you my experience, which was a little different coming out of college in 2006, having gone to college in Ohio. From a bit of a more old school place, very, very queer college. And kind of being there and being like, okay, there's different kinds of folks here. There's butch people, there's trans people here, like young. So nobody was like fully transitioned, or like there were some that were starting to. But as I was coming into my queerness, I realized that only was attracted to masculine people, only butches. And the butches that I had crushes on would be like, bro, you're my bro. Like, this is not, that's too gay for me. Like, it was always like an issue,
Too gay, yeah.
Like, for them, it just was unthinkable that butch on butch could be... I wasn't that butch, but I was, dressing masculine and kind of presenting masculine. And so what I saw was that there were trans guys with trans guys. And so I was like, if I want to be with a masculine person who was born female, I have to go the trans route.
Yeah.
And for me, love and relationships were always so important. I was so taught from a very early age that that's like the epitome of happiness. And I really internalized that, not just from my family, but also from like movies and books and stuff. That I was like, okay, and that's not to say that my gender isn't true, that my experimentation with testosterone wasn't true, or that my desire to have chest surgery isn't true. But like in that early stages, I was like, okay, if I want to be mask on mask, I have to be trans.
Wow.
And so I started binding and I started dating trans guys.
Yeah.
And I moved to San Francisco and I was in the trans guy community. But I was never like, I took tea for a while, but I never could imagine like how I would ever have the money to have chest surgery. And I wasn't ready for it then.
I think that's around the time I started to meet you, wasn't it? You were sort of in more of the...
It was right after. So I took tea for about a year. I was on a low dose. It did some things, but not enough to like make me pass as a man. And I didn't want it to pass. I always felt in between.
Yeah.
But I met Idexa. Yeah. And I dated Idexa for a year. And I was like, this person is very gender fluid, quite non-binary, older, masculine, but still plays with like femme accessories or like different energies. If this person can do that, I can do that. And so I got off of tea because being on tea didn't feel quite right. I'm glad I experimented and I'm glad it did what it did for me, but it didn't feel quite right. So I got off of it because of her.
Yeah.
Because I saw that you could exist and live your life as a kind of a fluid, non-binary queer person and have sex with all kinds of people. I mean, Idexa wasn't very discriminatory. Although I think she probably is more masc-leaning as far as like her interests go, but she kind of was like, whatever's hot, she would try to get at it.
Yeah.
But so for me, it was such a thing connected to who I could love, who I was allowed to love. And without being trans, I could not find another masc person who would be into me.
That's such an interesting perspective. I mean, obviously...
Very different from you.
Very different from mine. I mean, slightly different era.
Totally.
In terms
this is like 2006 to 2010. Yeah. These like 4 years is what I'm talking about in that time frame.
But fascinating to sort of hear from you on that sort of inside of that. I think that, often we only ever have our own experience of it. And one of the things I do really love about this sort of, the younger queer kids is like the language that has been, it's exploded now, and it's like that sort of the fluidity of it is so much, gives so much freedom to people to not have to, walk into that bar and like, are you going to sit at the bar? Are you going to sit at the table? Or are you butch? Are you trans? Like, do you feel enough? I love, I'm old school, so I am what I am. I'm butch. I'm like, I'm a butch woman. I'm proud of who I am. I walk through this world, but I've had time and opportunity to see other things and make that decision for myself. But I do love the fluidity, and I do love the, I was reading an article the other day where somebody was saying that they're seasonal gendered, where it's like different seasons, they feel different gendered. So it's like, it's autumn, so I feel more masculine. I was like, wow, so I do appreciate language, and I do appreciate people's, being able to really define who they are.
But also, as we take meaning out of clothing, clothing is just clothing. Like, it isn't necessarily masculine or feminine. It's just whatever, right? Seeing straight men in the media wear pearls as a trend, or earrings. Like, it's been really exciting for me to like see it. It seems kind of also basic. Like, of course men can wear earrings. Yeah. But I remember like, with my jewelry being like, I have to get my ears stretched. I have to, not that, I wanted to, but it was kind of like, this is the masculine way to wear jewelry. This is how I can decorate myself, but in a way that's not too feminine.
Yeah.
And now like those things are losing their meaning in a good way, I think,
No, I agree. I think that people can dress. It's funny being, like I said, sort of, I try not to, I always want to be open and, explore, and I hope to always keep growing and being around people that always push me to grow, and sometimes I'm like, is it just that I know clearly who I am? And for me, putting on dangly earrings or pearls does not feel comfortable? Or is it that I'm so stuck in this kind of stone butch way of like, this is how I have to show up, So I'm always challenging myself on that. And, sort of, is clothing being a perfect example, sort of, would I wear that or would I not wear it? And if I don't want to wear it, why? It's like, I'm watching my son grow, it's interesting because he's clearly presenting as male in the world and talks about that with all the choices, I'm straight. I'm like, great. It's all good, but I also see different ways that he will wear things or do things that I'm like, oh, that's really, really great, because, that might not have been masculine in the way that I would have thought about it. So I just love that. I love it for, that exploration.
And so with the new generation of folks, how are you feeling about, I've had the feeling that queerness is being co-opted.
Completely.
So how are you feeling with that?
It's such a tricky subject for me because I don't want to be gatekeepy at all. I live my life the way I want to live it. I surround myself with people I want to surround myself with. I love the way that I get reflected back who I am by my lovers or by friends, people in my life. So, but it is a struggle sometimes when it's like where I work, for example, Mistress Leathers, we've got about 100 employees. And in certain departments, there are a bunch of young queer folks, and they are dressing how they want. They are pronouncing it's beautiful, but it's like they're queer. And then, it's a cis woman presenting female, fantastic, queer, fantastic. And then, they come to the Christmas party, whatever, with their very male cis husband.
Right.
And I'm like, so, and in talking to people more and asking questions, this is the thing, we don't ask questions, right? Queer, I think, has become a word, to me, my understanding of it. I've reclaimed Dyke for myself because for a while I was, lesbian and I was queer and I was gay and I've been all the things. Dyke for me is the one that sticks. Because queer, I think, now is any non-conventional relationship.
Right? I'm shaking my head for those who are not in the room with us.
Yeah, I but it's like, if you're going to make a stand, like if you call yourself queer and you're in a non-conventional relationship, you're poly, you're, sleep with, fuck with whoever, you're kinky, whatever. If you are going to take a stand for me, if you are going to go against the grain for me, for then I've got to claim you as my people.
Mm-hmm. But do they?
Well, that's always the test. That's always the test, because if these two people that I'm talking about, then walk out in the world and safely pass as straight and choose that privilege within their family groups, within their...
And never say a word.
And never say a word. But then in queer spaces, they are like, presenting queer. That's a whole nother thing, because you now are using the privilege and co-opting that. But in the world, I'm not safe to walk into a gas station in the middle of nowhere. My femme partner or my, butch friend or my, queer lover, we don't have that safety. So if you don't have my back when you pass and you choose to pass, then that has me really questioning. Then I think that's where the co-option and that's what gets me kind of upset. But I'm also have to keep expanding my views on what queer looks like. I do. Because if I stop expanding my view on what queer is like, then I'm saying, listen, this is what queer is. I grew up in queer. I know queer. Mm-hmm. My queer is the correct queer. And so what I did is I chose another word. I'm Dyke. I'm a butch Dyke.
Yeah. I hear that. Language is malleable. It keeps growing. But as I heard Dan Savage say on one of his podcasts recently, he said something along the lines of I think he was talking about the word queer, and he was like, language is so that we can understand each other. Mm-hmm. People just make things up. They just add meanings to language. It stops to mean the thing it meant. How we're supposed to communicate. He said it in a different way. It was really precise and smart.
He's very eloquent.
He is very eloquent. But I was like, dude, and maybe, I'm 40. I'm getting to that age where I'm crotchety a little bit. But I had these two interactions, one in person, one online. And the one online was with a creator who's a polyamorous creator, who's a cis woman, has male lovers. I believe she identifies as queer. But she's talking about having sex with her male lover and how queer the sex
cis male lover.
Cis male. Mm-hmm. She's a cis woman with a cis man lover. I think most of her relationships are with cis men. She talks about only cis men, really. I've seen her talk about only them. And she's talking about the queer sex she's having with her cis male lover.
Yeah.
Because she feels like the sex they're having is expansive and not typical. And I was like, just fucking own it, that it's straight, and just you're having straight sex. You're
and maybe he's putting panties on and you're strapping it on, but it's still straight sex.
It could be subversive, it could be interesting, but why do you have to call it queer? And I said something, and a bunch of queer people liked what I said, and a bunch of straight people put me down, and I moved on, I unfollowed her, whatever. But
social media,
whatever, but I couldn't walk past it, because I was like, you as a queer identifying person are doing a thing that feels very painful to those of us who are actually gay.
There's harm.
We didn't reclaim this word so that straight people can just now take it and use it to look cool, to look different, look more interesting. I don't know what they're doing, but... And then another person, and at least this woman identifies as queer, so at least there's that. But another person I talked to in person who is a client of mine, and she, in our whole history of knowing each other, I'd asked her early on, I was like, are you queer? I know she's married to a man, has kids, a cis man. And she said, no, not really. Yeah, not really, but, I'm really open-minded, whatever. It's like, okay. And so she's telling me about how she goes to queer spaces, and she goes to conferences.
Yeah.
And she goes to queer spaces in these conferences. And I was like, trying to gently be like, why do you go to queer spaces?
Yeah.
And she basically, it was a really convoluted conversation. It was hard. It wasn't very straightforward. So it's kind of hard for me to understand, because I'm trying to be gentle and not gatekeepy, but also gently be like, are you queer? Did you change your mind? And she's essentially telling me that she identifies queerness is about not being in a box. That it's more of a queer theory queer. The bending of time and space and identity. But I was like, so are you opening your relationship with your husband because you want to explore things with queer people and women, non-binary people, trans people? And she's like, well, I could have sex with just about anybody. I mean, everyone's beautiful. And I was like, that's not what I'm asking, right? And it was so frustrating, because I was like, this isn't what queerness is. The spaces you go to as a non-queer person, those queer people want to be with each other. We want to be together. If we're at a therapy conference, we might be processing something difficult about our clients.
We want to understand the word and the meaning of being in a safe space.
And we want to be with each other. We like to be safe in safe. That's why we have queer spaces, so that people who are living a life that is wrought with difficulty can come together and feel safe. And you're kind of messing that up for us.
I think that's why for me the word queer has become something I don't really use for myself, because I think it's gotten so murky.
Yeah.
And, it's not like I had to, again, from an era, and it still happens in many parts of the world. We live in bubbles, but, I have had my nose fractured by somebody hitting me in the face for being a dyke. I've sort of had so many fights, where somebody's yelling at my femme girlfriend, they just need dick. I mean, all of the stuff that, thrown out of places, I've been through the struggle in places where I had to fight and my, people had to fight. And it has not felt safe. And there are many places still, even in this country, where if I'm on a cross-country trip, airport bathrooms, fucking hard.
Yeah.
As a masked person.
Yeah.
I sometimes go into the male bathroom because they don't look. And I've had people run out of the bathrooms and a boyfriend run in like, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you doing in here? So I think that it's not like everybody has to struggle to be able to claim a label. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? It's not like...
but it comes with the struggle.
But you have to
without
understand.
having to do it. It just comes with it.
I think that you have to understand. And then you said earlier, there's like this connection through hard times, trauma, like when you're in queer space, or whatever, butch space, dyke space, queer space, gay space, trans space. It's really, really amazing. And I mean, my co-partner is, black woman, and there's a really clear, there are times where she just needs to be around black women. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean that I, as her partner, have a right to walk into, no. So I think that, and the reason we did, Rochelle and I, we started saying queer women retreats, but it got murky because what does that mean? Are trans men welcome? Certainly trans women are welcome because it's queer women's space.
But we can go back to that conversation. I feel like
but that's
maybe
kind of
half of the retreat was kind of cool with that, and half wasn't. All of us were confused about.
It started changing, and I think one of the reasons we haven't done one for a while is because there was that division starting to happen. But what I'm saying is like there is importance in people having spaces that they can feel clearly understood dynamics and safety. You don't have to explain
yourself at that basic level,
right? And you don't have to misinterpret somebody and get into this kind of vulnerable space or hookup space or whatever, and you're like, oh, you sleep with cis dudes,
yeah,
or you're a straight woman who's experimenting with a dyke. Like, no, that's not what I'm not doing that. So I hear you, but for me, my path has just been like I love the word queer. It's great out there. I tend not to refer to it myself because it's not clear enough for myself or for people these days.
It's funny when you were talking about the definitions of queer women for the retreat. I had one experience there of not quite hooking up, but getting into that space with a woman who was bisexual. Mm-hmm. I think a friend of hers brought her, and I think she only came that one time. But we were laying on that. Remember that big hammock?
Oh, I remember.
Covered in the blanket.
I remember that. I remember that.
We were like
specific
slightly
thing.
touching each other under the blanket, and I was like, "This is super hot." And she was bisexual, or maybe bicurious. I don't know what she was, but it didn't go anywhere. But I was like, I mean, I was young. It didn't matter to me, But I was like, oh, maybe she's not actually like gay, because she was willing to just like take a little step towards a queer hookup, but not really jump into it. Not to say that maybe she wasn't that into me, or who knows. But I was just like, wait, you remember that moment?
I do. I remember seeing you on the hammock.
Do you know who I'm talking? Like,
yes.
I don't remember her name or anything,
yes.
but I remember her face. She was like a cute little femme.
Yeah, no, I remember exactly what you're talking about. I mean, over the years, I've had a lot of my butch friends, mask friends, trans friends, who love the challenge of sleeping with a straight woman who's curious.
Not me.
Not me. Because I'm not trying to be somebody's experiment.
No.
Like, I tend to lean more into stone butch, so it's not even about a woman, but there are so many fucking dykes, queer women, gay women, clearly loving being queer, dyke, gay, lesbian, whatever the word. There are so many, and I love it. Mm-hmm. And I'm not trying to be someone's experiment. I don't want to be Yeah, I just don't. I love queerness in that way. When I'm saying like lesbian, dyke, queer, gay, that's a huge hot switch for me.
Yeah.
However you like, whether you're presenting, mask or you're femme, if you're like, loving women, I'm down.
Yeah.
But I'm not trying to do, it's not, sounds awful to say. I'm not saying would I sleep with a bisexual woman? I mean, I have, but I might, but it's just, I feel very clearly like, yeah.
What's your response to some bisexuals coming at you going, well, that's biphobic?
Right, exactly.
What's your response to that? And I'm not agreeing with them. I'm just saying.
I just think it's like, I get to choose where and when I spend time with my body and someone else's body.
Yeah.
And there's lines I draw. I will celebrate you. I will march for you. I will have your back. I will, protest against laws again. I love it. I love the freedom of it. I love that's your life. But I personally, I'm not trying to, I've talked to a lot of bi women who are like, yeah, but it's not like we're just, if you're in a monogamous relationship with somebody, it's like, well, I like men and women. So I'm choosing you as a woman. I'm hot for you. This is what I'm doing. This is a relationship I'm in. It's not like any more than another, fully queer lover is going to be like
there's another woman over there. Yeah.
Right. But I don't really want to be, God, it sounds awful. I don't really want to be sharing a bed with a cis man on any level in my life. Mm-hmm. So if someone is sexually active with cis men, bless it, love it. And
that's, say the thing out loud that people don't say. Because I hear you. And, if it had been on paper, like had I write my partner, like love of my life, like the person I totally see myself with till I die, has a male partner of 20 years.
Yeah.
Shares a bed with him. I don't know how much sex they have. I think they have some. Yeah. Here and there. But it's like, had it been on paper somewhere, and I would have been like, do I go for this? I'd been like, fuck no.
Right, but you fell in love with somebody.
I fell in love with somebody. This is the person I've ever, who's been the best for me I've ever had. The best to me and the best for me. And this is where we're at. And it is what it is. And for so long I struggled with that, being like, you could be with me all the time, but you're choosing to be with him half the time. Like, why? Yeah. And then now I'm just like, life is life. This is her karma. This is her family. Like, this is the person she chooses to be her family. Like, this is not my business. It's not about me.
Who you crush on and who you fall in love with and who you, my girl, fucking hot as shit. Kinky as shit. We have beyond, it's great. She's a pussy loving queer, right? But I love the fact that so it's not about creating a life with family. I have a 15-year-old son. She has a life partner who she's raising kids with, and I respect that completely, But, so it's not about not having cis men in your life. One of my jobs in London when I was a young dyke was I worked at a strip club where I would be the person to go clean up the little booths after they jerked off. Oh. Cleaning off the mirror, and at Mr. S I go in the change room. I'm so close to men's bodies. Yeah. I'm measuring their cock and balls for like a sex toy, or I'm trying to figure out a butt plug harness for them, or and I have huge respect and love for men and their bodies. I make stuff for them. But I don't need to. That's so true. You're very intimate with men's bodies. Very intimate. Yeah. But I don't need to be closer than that. Yeah. And that's my choice. Yeah. And it's not, I think the problem is when you start to say things in this era where people want to if anyone's listening, they're like, oh, well, Skeeter is anti this or this, and this. I'm not saying that. I'm saying at this point in my life. Choices
for you and your body and your safety.
Absolutely. Totally. And I love it for other people that they get to make choices. Yeah. I love the freedom, but I'm making my choices. And these are the choices I'm making. And for most dykes I know, especially a stone, butch dyke, the gold star, whatever, label you want to put on it, I have more intimate contact with men's bodies than anyone else I know. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And so, because I have the line that I have, because I've never had a sexual attraction to a guy, I can do that with utmost respect and joy without having any weird feelings about it. Like some of the people have said the most incredible, the straight women. When I listen to my sister sometimes and she'll say something, or straight women I know about like this sort of disparaging thing, I'm like, wow, I have nothing but respect for it because I don't need to get close to it.
It's like, women who are straight who'll be like, God, I wish I was a lesbian. It'd be so much easier. Like, no, the people who you're vulnerable to are the people who hurt you. If you like men, then they will hurt you. If you like women, they will hurt you. Like, you'll have things to say about whatever gender you like. It's not easier. It's really hard too. Like, relationships are just hard. But there's also and for a lot of us, queer, dykes, lesbians, women loving women, giving it a big circle around that whole category. Like, there's an innate respect of womanhood and women's bodies and being raised as female. We just like know.
Yeah.
I feel like a little bit more about it, so that they really have to be really bad for us to talk shit, you know?
Yeah. I mean,
like the straight women who are saying shit about men, it's like,
living
men are
with them and
basically kind of shitty sometimes. Like, I get it, not all men, but a lot of them,
and women too. I mean, God.
Well, right, women too.
There's some very toxic relationships and very toxic people out there in the dyke community as well. I mean, it's not, none of us are sort of immune from it. It's just people being people. But right. I do think that we get to choose who our intimates are and where the safe spaces are, and the vulnerable spaces. And I think, as a butch woman, and I obviously many, many conversations with butch women and mask people where our bodies are, it's a guessing game. It's hard. I mean, the couple of butch lovers I've had, I was having this conversation the other day with my girl. It's like the couple of butch lovers I've had, I felt much freer to do like things, sexual acts, sort of like, because it's butch on butch. Mm-hmm. Whereas often over the years with femmes, it's like, it's sort of a minefield, right? It's like, and I have so much respect for femmes who have navigated and navigate this minefield all the time of butch bodies. Like, can I touch your chest? Can I touch can I say pussy? Because, they're loving women and women's bodies, but they have to be very delicate around, and it changes every day.
So how do you feel like you do that with other butch people? You feel like it's easier for you?
I think as a butch person? It's been a while, but I think that it felt, I think because there's a commonality with the, not being trans. So I don't struggle about being in a woman's body because it's the one I want to be in, but it doesn't mean that the way that we've been seen in the world, our bodies have been disrespected, or we've been, so there hasn't been a huge love and respect of us walking through the world with these masculine bodies, So I think that it's just weird. It's strange. I think it's a minefield for ourselves, every day, and also for our lovers. And so I have a deep appreciation for anyone that can navigate that with me, with us, in a way that they're like using language, asking questions, being bold, like clearly expressing desire, in a way that creates safe space, to be what feels vulnerable, So, yeah.
I mean, our bodies are so connected to trauma, right? And so many people have trauma, like it's so common that I feel like can't assume anything about anyone's body, right? But you're right, like it seems like a more natural thing to like touch the chest of a femme person, assuming they're comfortable with it, but they might not be.
No, absolutely.
Because of trauma, not because of gender.
Absolutely.
But like gender and trauma, there's intersections.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's, I think, why there's also a lot of young people who are choosing to forego gender altogether and just kind of be like, I'm agender or I am asexual because I don't want to deal with the trauma and the body and the complications surrounding all of that.
No, you're right. I mean, everybody, hopefully anytime you're being sexual and touching somebody that there's some agreements and consent laid down at the beginning that, you can. But just because someone's in a femme body doesn't mean that they love having their chest called breast and touched. I mean, of course, there's always that sensitivity. And I think that it's just a dance. Mm-hmm. It's a dance. And why I love kink is because I think that there are different avenues, so many different avenues to get to that sort of hot intimacy versus often in non-kink, there's only certain avenues you're going to get there. Mm-hmm. There's only certain body parts you're going to touch in certain ways, however creative you are. With kink, there's so many more dynamics or sort of, power dynamics and physical dynamics and psychological dynamics that really, it's a playing field.
That's such a good point.
And I love it. And I think that you can learn a lot about somebody, in kink. And sometimes it's not sexual necessarily. Right. Like you were talking about with the piercing on the other podcast. So I think it's a bigger playing field.
Yeah.
Which I think that a lot of people don't have for whatever reasons. I wish people had it.
Yeah, people they think of it as like the scary, dark thing, a dungeon with like chains. And you're like, it can be so many things, right? Yeah. Pain doesn't need to be a part of it at all.
Not at all. Sex doesn't need to be a part of it. Pain doesn't have to be a part of it. Dark dungeons don't have to be a part of it. You know, it's really just exploring the limits of...
Tailor-made.
Yeah. Tailor-made. Yeah. Made to measure. Love it. I'll get my tape measure out.
That's right. We'll bring it back to tattoos. How has being tattooed, has it connected to your butch identity, a stone identity, your like different intersections of kinky person identity that you've held throughout your years?
I mean, absolutely. I think that taking the body of a woman, and I was clear, I've never questioned that I am trans, want to be trans, clearly in a woman's body, but that doesn't mean that it's a completely comfortable place for me to be. I used to have a really, really, really big chest, really big breasts, and I had reduction. And this was early on, this was like in the 90s in San Francisco, a lot of people were starting to have, their tits removed, and it was never that for me, but they needed to be a lot smaller. They were lovely, but they weren't mine.
Yeah.
Then yeah, right. And then tattooing has just given me the opportunity to claim my body in the way that I want to, map my life in the way I want to. And I do think for myself that my body, when I look in a mirror, it represents more of that sort of, masculine, butch, and it's funny because, I know a lot of femmes who've got finger tattoos and they look beautiful. They got the nails, they got the finger tattoos. It's hot. And then I look at my fingers that are tattooed and my hands that are tattooed, and to me, it's butch hands.
Yeah.
So I love that.
It's changed though. It's like femmes weren't doing that in the 90s.
No.
This is new.
That was more of a butch thing to get your knuckles done.
Yeah.
And I just, as you talked about in one of the last podcasts, when you were actually talking to my girl, we had the daddy girl tattoos, where I have the key and she has the padlock, and it's like there are tattoos on my body that represent a time with somebody. And as you and me talked about earlier before we started recording, is that I never want to throw anything away. If somebody has been significant in my life, and maybe we see each other, maybe we don't. Maybe we're family now, maybe we're not. But there's a story of them in my heart. And so when I put that on my body, and I could point to several tattoos on my body that are for somebody, or for a time with somebody. And so I think for me, it's just reclaiming my body, making my body my own. And also, so I think the tattoos it's almost like I'm using a lot of words, but I don't necessarily have the words for how it feels to have them. And I love you as a tattooist. I mean, I love you anyway, Micah, but
I love you
as
too.
a tattoo artist, I think your skill set's incredible. I love everything you've put on my body. And I love the way that you see me, and that when I've come in, I'm like, I think I just want small letters on my knuckles. You're like, no, we're going big. You change the direction of the thing on my neck. Every single time you have done a tattoo on my body, and I change my mind all the time. I have ADHD. I come in for this. I get this. I change all the time. As Aidan said the other day, she goes, "You must be a nightmare for a client." I'm like, because you work really, really well with me, and every single time, because you see me, and I feel seen by you, the tattoo becomes something that maybe I didn't walk in with the idea of, but I walk out being like, "Damn, this looks good."
I'm so happy to hear that.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
I really love the rope.
Yeah, that was a good one, wasn't it? Yeah. I love it.
There's a very deep butchness in that, very old, like that we were talking about, like being in a kind of a port town, and there's the red light district and the tattoo shop in the back and the one gay bar, and like this is what that reminds me of, I guess, that, like your beginnings there. Yeah, the
anchor and the rope. I mean, because my dad was in the Navy and I was in a naval town, but so there is definitely that. And the knot, the rope. I mean, it's around my wrist. It's beautiful. Yeah, just thinking about my other hand now. So, but thank you for being who you are in the world, because just like you said at the beginning, people had access to yoga because of how I looked and who I was, and I think that coming to you, as who you are in the world, to be tattooed by you, to walk in, feel seen. There's just a deep, because it's a vulnerable spot to be tattooed by somebody. And I really, really appreciate you. I think you play a very important role in the world of tattoos.
Thank you for saying that. That's very kind.
I mean it.
What's the future of your tattoo work?
Well,
what do you see when you're like on your deathbed? What do you have significantly? Do you have more plans that you know of, or it's just kind of like we're going? I mean, I know that you'll text me and you'll be like, "Oh, I think I want this piece over here, and I think I want to do this over here, and maybe we'll finish the belly piece at some point. Maybe we won't, but like, you know, you'll have your ideas. They'll pop up, and you'll tell me about them. But like, do you have some sort of plan?
No.
Okay.
No, I never have done. I think that I get an idea, and exactly, like I might be in a moment in my life, I might be in a relationship in my life where I'm like, that's going to mark that time in my life, and I want that. I might change it, you know. I really want my thigh hip piece finish with all the water, because that is a full piece. There's fire on the other one. That balance for me is something, but I get this spontaneous, like, I want a key, I want a lock, I want this, I want that word, I want my hand done. There's definitely more tattoos in my future.
Definitely.
And I don't know what they're all going to be. And yeah, so I don't know. I don't know what it'll look like when I'm laying on my deathbed. And we'll all be very beautiful.
Yeah.
All of us that are heavily tattooed.
Will be like the Sistine Chapel.
I know.
The body is a temple.
It's interesting because, you know, that whole Japanese art of, or I don't even it's Japanese, but that was the piece I was reading about, that where they take the skin and they dry it and they make art.
Do they do that?
Yeah.
Are you allowed to do that with human skin?
Well, I don't know whether it's something that, I don't know. I just remember reading an article and seeing the photographs of these human skins.
Yeah. And
I'm like, it's so weird, because in some ways, whether we choose to get cremated or buried or planted in a tree or whatever, and our bodies, you know, sort of disappear from this earthly realm, and all that work and all that art. And so I get it in some ways, like taking that. But I also feel like my tattoos on my body, and I see that on other people's, is like, this is me. This is Skeeter in this lifetime, in this body. This is the reflection of me. This is how I look. This is how people remember me and they see me. So that goes with me. You know, when I leave this earthly plane, my body is no longer needed. But I do get it. I do get that idea of taking it as artwork and sort of, you know, putting the skin on a wall in a frame.
Yeah, but I think thinking about it, like someone who's worn their tattoos for 20 years, like they don't look very bright anymore. You know, they're kind of like, it just kind of becomes part of your landscape. It's not really like a thing that's on you, so it's not like a painting. So I'm like, I mean, maybe that will look like, if I think about like my back piece is pretty cool. That could look cool once I'm dead, but
well, the skin looks very different once you're dead. There's no blood flow to it anyway, but you know.
Right. So I'm like, does it look that good though at that point? Like I don't
even know that it's about
maybe
the
that's
look.
not the point.
I think it's a fascinating concept that I've seen and read about, where people do that, and definitely, you know, whether it's legal or not, it's not my journey. I do think, you know, my body will
just go on. Yeah,
but you know,
something else. Yeah,
but you're right. I mean, I don't forget I have tattoos, but sometimes people, you know, that whole thing, if you walk down the street and some dude or somebody goes, "Nice tits," I'm like, "Did you say nice tits?" I'm like, "Oh, tats. Yes, thank you."
You're like,
yeah, they're barely there, but thank you. So I think that, you know, it just is the newer ones I've gotten from you on my neck and on my hands are much more visible to me in the world. And so, but so many on my body, I'm just like I have a back piece. I have a whole Meatloaf song on my back, Heaven Can Wait, because that got me through some really rough teenage years, that song.
I love Meatloaf.
And I love Meatloaf. And I put that song on my back. I never see it, you know.
It's protective.
I forget it's there. Sometimes I'm at Kabuki or some hot springs and I'm in the changing room taking, and I turn around, some woman's reading my back. She's like, hold on. I was like, what? Oh, okay, yeah. So, yeah, I love my tattoos. I love that you're my tattoo artist.
I love that too. It's been an honor. It's, you know, it's so off, like, it's not often that I get to tattoo people who have a lot of other work from other people. And when like that person, you, namely, is like, okay, like I'm sticking with you for like, as long as it makes sense or whatever. It's such an honor, you know, because I'm like, little old me. Like, I don't think of myself as like, I mean, now I feel like I have quite a lot of experience, but I don't think of myself that way. I still feel like a baby tattoo artist, you know, in most ways.
Your work is gorgeous. I mean, I was talking about that back piece you did on that person. It suits me. You know what I mean? I don't know, like people go to, somebody else for solid black work, or somebody goes to somebody else for like, whatever. But your work and who you are and how you see me in our relationship, it completely matches me. Mm-hmm. So it's like a relationship. I'm going to come back to you for that.
Well, also that, I was taught to do everything, and people aren't taught to do everything these days. Like, people have a niche, and that works for them, and that's cool. But like, because I was taught to do everything, I can meet your needs. Yeah. I can do the watercolor in your thigh, and I can do the trad lettering, and I can do, like, whatever you need, I can do, and I love that, you know, because, I mean, who would wish to have less skills than I do? For sure, I love that I have all the skills. But sometimes I'm like, oh, but people have a niche, have more followers, and they have more, Yeah. Because it's like the yoga thing, you being a yoga teacher, looking at what you do, like, that's a niche.
It's
like,
very much a niche.
You took a niche and you, like, filled it, right? And so I'm, like, kind of generic, but also, like, not, because someone like you, who is a little bit old school but likes different styles, I can meet all of your needs. That's pretty cool for me.
Yeah, I think it's looking pretty good.
Yeah.
I'm happy with it.
Yeah.
Look forward to the next one.
Yeah. Thank you so much for letting me come over and interview you and talking about all things so frankly and honestly and openly. I really, really appreciate that. I appreciate you and love you.
It's an absolute pleasure. I love the podcast. I think what you're doing is great. And me and my dogs, sorry if they've been really noisy.
They've been great.
Yeah. But thank you so much.